Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for this panel discussion, where we're going to be looking at the challenges and the complexities of reporting social value and sustainability data from site. So firstly, just to start with some introductions, I'm delighted to be joined by an expert panel today to explore this topic a little bit further. Both Ashleigh and Julia on my left will be introducing themselves in just a second, but they very much are involved with managing a lot of the data that we're going to talk about today within their own organisations. Firstly, my name is Liam McEvoy and I'm going to chair the session this afternoon. I'm one of the co-founders of SustainIQ. We are the all-in-one ESG and sustainability reporting software solution. We make it easy for our customers typically to track their sustainability performance across all of their different projects. So we're over exhibiting at D460, and then if you want to pop over and find out a little bit more about the software, please do so. The team are there, or you can find out a little bit more on our website, sustainiq.com. So just to introduce you to our expert panel, Ashleigh, I'll hand over to you first. If you want to tell everyone who you are, the company you work with, and your role at the business as well.
Thanks, Liam. It's great to join you all here today. I'm Ashleigh Goss, Sustainability and Submissions Director for Neilcott Construction. Neilcott's a £140 million turnover main contractor focusing on London and the South East. We work a lot with public sector clients, so sustainability and social value is of huge importance to us. This is a hugely relevant topic.
Thanks, Ashleigh. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Anakum. I'm Senior Sustainability Manager for Vistry Group. So Vistry Group are a major house builder in the UK, one of the largest by volume of homes built. We've got 26 regional businesses across the UK, 3 timber frame homes, and yes, sustainability is really at the core of how we're sort of delivering on our commercial drivers and commercial aims. And I think we, towards the end of last year, we announced our sort of new strategic direction, so increasingly focus on partnerships-led delivery of homes. That means we're sort of affordable homes and social value are really at the core of our new kind of commercial aims as a business. So yeah, really pleased to be here and joined by Ashleigh and Liam.
Cheers, guys. Thanks, folks, and thank you for being here as well. So look, just to get into the session then today, I think we can all agree who are already under immense pressure to deliver projects on time, on budget, and all the rest of it. So getting access to accurate, reliable data, getting visibility of that data is very, very difficult. It's not easy. So Ashleigh, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay. For the benefit of the folks in the audience today, I think it would be useful to get a bit of an overview maybe of some of the frameworks that Neilcott Construction would typically report under, and I suppose maybe more importantly, like the different types of data that we're actually talking about here today. What is it exactly you need your project teams to start reporting back to you guys on?
Sure, yeah, that's a really interesting topic because they're really, CSR and social value and environmental protections have been around for a long time. It's not new in itself, but the scale and complexity of the data has just increased exponentially, and it's really on a trajectory that will just get more and more onerous as the world takes notice of climate emergency and becomes much stricter in regulatory frameworks to support that. So as a business, we have different levels of reporting requirements. So whether that's a compliance to new legislation that's coming out. We're focused in the UK, but there's the CSRD that's coming in the EU. There's also financial carbon reporting as through the accounting frameworks, and there's things like the ISO certificates and the carbon reduction plans, and that's before we even start throwing in the clients and their own reporting requirements around their strategic priorities. So with the Social Value Act coming in, all of, for us, we work mostly with public sector clients, so they need to evidence upstream that they're actually delivering on those requirements. And almost all of them operate under a different thing. They have different standards and different metrics. So from a company perspective, we're obviously looking at data for our own performance and how we can actually assess whether we're meeting our own targets or whether it's on a project base that we're then complying with things like BREEAM, LEED, well building. So there's so many different types of frameworks and compliance that we need to report. So we need to have adaptable data, we need to be agile and have it transparent that we can actually manipulate's the wrong word, adapt how we're reporting and what the information is. Some of it is not complicated. We've been recording waste and water and electricity for years, but it's used in different ways. And then with the whole, EDI and mental health and well-being, that's all, that's only getting more and more onerous. So data's evolving, and I think it'll continue to evolve. And how we're held to account for that data will only become more onerous over time. So things like contractual net zero requirements, it's becoming almost standard, and we're seeing it also being reflected in the planning process as well, where it's defined within the planning conditions, the particular performance requirements, and as we try to capture that data up and downstream, you can't shy away from it. So we've all got to get a handle on it. So it's a tough call, but we're all getting there. And so there is a feeling of we're all finding our way together, which is quite nice because it's not really that confrontational feeling. There's a will. I think most people and most businesses have a desire to do better in terms of sustainability. So. It's just making it easy for them to get that data across and be able to use it.
Unreal, but it kind of just goes to show that actually the data is required for so many things. It's not just the frameworks. Obviously, you guys the business needs it for lots and lots of different reasons. Julia, in terms of Vistry Group, is there any other kind of frameworks or data capture you guys as well?
Yeah, I think probably just echo a lot of what you've said. I agree with the fact that the data in and of itself isn't complex, and when we talk about our operations, we're talking about fuel, gas, electricity, and all of those in and of themselves are relatively easy data points. What we're sort of grappling with is volume of data. That data is coming from lots of different sources, so accessibility to it. So our suppliers play a really key role in providing us with the data we need in a format that we need. But when we start talking about scope 3, so as you've said, sort of upstream and downstream emissions, it gets a bit more complicated. It does require cross-departmental sort of collaboration. And again, depending on who you're speaking to, they do produce that data, but they produce it for different reasons. So we sort of have to go through this process of transforming it in order for it to be usable for us and for us to be able to use that to respond to ESG indices. So I think one of the biggest ones we'd say, as a large organisation, we've now got the responsibility to be able to communicate how we're doing, not just with carbon, but across social value, across governance. And we are subject to sort of thousands of KPIs, whether it's CDP, Next Generation, which is an industry-specific benchmark, and FTSE for Good. We've got our eye on quite a few different metrics, and we're sort of increasingly expecting our investors, or our investors are expecting us to be able to produce results and be able to, at the end of the year, be able to report a certain ranking against our peers. And that, again, I'd say it's more so transforming data points that we consider quite simple into things that can be comparable, can be benchmarked internally and externally, but also for our team. So my colleague is here as well. For us, we constantly think of how do we use that to keep progressing our sustainability strategy. We don't just want to be using it to report it, but we want to actually be influencing change. So, yeah.
Guys, brilliant. I think, look, one thing that's coming through really, really strong from both of you guys is the vastness of the data. In terms of some of the challenges, some of the blockages that you've either experienced or continue to experience, could you talk us through like a few examples of those as well? Ashleigh, if we maybe start.
I think one of the, the first challenges really is, as a business, to understand where your data is and how you can actually transfer that into usable data. So it's just identifying all of that and gathering it all together. has been, it's an ongoing challenge, and I think it probably will be for a while, but it's all really useful in terms of analysing our own processes and making those more efficient, which we are hoping digital tools will help us with. So it's really unpicking a lot of that data.
Yeah, I noted down a couple of things. I think, to echo your point, responsibilities and roles is really critical. Accuracy and coverage of that data. Oftentimes these ESG indices, they ask, as a percentage of X, how are you performing in this area? As a percentage of your active sites, what percentage were able to deliver on this sort of social value? And as a team, it's really difficult for us to be able to provide that if all 26 regional businesses haven't been able to come back to us and give us an indication of what that means. And so coverage from that perspective, but then accuracy as well. So unless we've standardized processes and across the group we've said, this is the definition for this KPI, and this is the process for collecting it, make sure you're all adhering to that, and please report that back to us. Then when we get to the end of the year and we get that validated or verified, if we're not all singing from the same hymn sheet, it can be very challenging for us to trust the data that we're reporting. So I'd say standardization is one of the, and definitions and sort of standard operating procedures, those all play a really big part in ensuring that those blockages can actually be turned into opportunities, which we'll sort of get to in a little bit. But underpinning all of that, just to wrap that up, is the why. So it's easy oftentimes to set up a meeting and say, look, we need this data from you. And increasingly, we're sort of trying to approach it like the reason behind that is we need to be able to report against our carbon action plan, which is linked to our sustainable our science-based targets, and that is an external commitment that the whole group has made to ensure that we achieve net zero by 2040. And unless you're able to kind of communicate the why behind why you're asking for a really random data point, and you want to make sure that it's accurate, it gets really hard to get people on board and make sure that they're sort of consistently build that relationship with them. They're consistently providing you with that information, but also that they can give a damn about it and they can kind of get involved with it. So it's, in a way, we're talking about integrating the sustainability strategy within roles in a way that makes sense to them. And data is a really effective way to start those conversations, but you really need to make sure you're bringing it back home to this is the impact, this is the influence, and this is the reason why.
And I think just to add, building it in as easily to the actual processes that, the guys are doing out on site and each of the roles and responsibilities, as Julia says, the easier that you can make it for people to capture, the right data, the right time, in the right format, then, the easier everything is. Not easy.
No, it's definitely not easy. And I think a lot of people in the audience could probably understand a lot of those blockages and a lot of those challenges. I think they're sector wide. Julia, one of the things you kind of mentioned there, I wouldn't mind just exploring a wee bit further. I thought it was interesting. I think one thing, again, you guys have kind of emphasized this time and time again, that none of this is a one person or a one department job anymore. Those days are gone. Everyone has a role, everyone has a responsibility. And I'd be keen to just dive a wee bit deeper in terms of how you guys have embedded that within Vistry Group. And you mentioned like data owners, for example. I think that's really, really interesting, actually putting the responsibility on those particular roles. So if you don't mind, just a wee bit more sort of info around how you've embedded the day-to-day and all of this reporting into the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, good question. I think data owners or sort of points of contact within each region is really important. So we've recently established sustainability leads across each region, and we've got 26 of those regions. And I mentioned our factories as well, so we've got a sustainability lead who looks after all of our factories. And that just means our group-wide sustainability team has one point of contact to go to when it comes to accessing certain types of data. And those are typically, they won't necessarily be the data owners, but they'll be sort of the sponsors for that region to make sure that we can get access to that data. And what we're hoping is to build that role into something that gives ownership. They gain ownership of the sustainability strategy, and they have to sort of operationalize something that's a bit more group level, a bit more strategic, into something very specific into those functions. So just to go into a bit more detail there, so we've recently launched our Carbon Action Plan, and that's linked to achieving our commitment of net zero by 2040. And there are 4 different areas to a Carbon Action Plan. So it's measure, so that's the one we're sort of focused on and is most relevant to the conversation. After that, obviously, reduce. You're able to reduce after you start to measure your impact, and then report. So it's all sort of linked to what we're talking about. But we're really focused on, first of all, getting that granularity of data from a region who look after multiple different sites. And if they look after sites, we can start to drill even deeper into plot level data. And then we can start to build profiles, we can start to benchmark information. When it comes to waste, for instance, we know what waste streams we have and how much waste is being generated on a site level. And we can start comparing that across all the regions, and we've got enough sort of volume of data to be able to gather some really good insights. And that, all of that, it's our job as sustainability leads then to take all of that information and go, okay, what are we doing with that when it comes to driving progress against our net zero strategy? As far as the sustainability lead is concerned, they just see what's happening on a group level, and oftentimes we'll have conversations with them, we'll provide them with a report, and they'll turn around and go, who's on the bottom, who's the bottom ranked? And that can be a motivation in and of itself, sort of, we don't want to be on the bottom, so what can we do to make sure we're not? We'll take what we can get, so we'll we're happy with that. So we're like, yep, okay, we'll help you get there. From our perspective, great, you're, positive improvements. And then we'll sort of bring that information back to them. We'll tell you how. And now we've got sort of that relationship, but also we're embedding some of those actions a lot better. So people, I think, to summarize that, it's relationships, it's collaborating, it's people. I mentioned suppliers, and they have a role to play in that as well. But when it comes to operations, it's building those fundamental relationships on a regional level. And then even further still as we keep going. Ashleigh, I don't know if there's anything you'd maybe add to that?
We find it quite useful to raise the profile of sustainability and social value generally. So my role covers work winning as well. So right from the tender stage, we're thinking about, obviously we're responding to the client's actual requirements, and some of those are really quite enormous nowadays. It's 10 to 15% of a tender of tender quality scoring. So that's a lot of that's a lot of influence. So having that influence within the bidding process, creating that proposal, and it's got a high profile right through from handover once the project is won, and it's embedded in the reporting requirements for that project team from day one and right through. And obviously if there are certifications such as BREEAM, then obviously that follows on through as well. But having that accountability across the different levels, and right through to suppliers and supply chain, expectations and commitments in terms of the more basic sort of apprenticeship, hands-on doing work experience, that's all fed through, and it's all very visible. So I think that's been the biggest success for us, really, in terms of getting the data out.
There's definitely a behavioural aspect to it, and you guys won't remember, but 20 odd years ago when we started out on the health and safety journey, there was a large aspect of trying to get that buy-in, and we're kind of back there again this time with ESG, with sustainability, social value. I'm slightly biased, obviously, being one of the co-founders of SustainIQ, but a spreadsheet just doesn't cut it. Like what you guys are talking about is not possible to do that level of reporting, that level of analysis using a spreadsheet. So I imagine a digital solution is critical in terms of the data capture, the data reporting, the metrics, the KPIs, but also like your future plans in terms of what you want to start doing with all of this data as well. So, would I be right in terms of that role now for a digital solution to help drive this within the business? Julia, I'll come back over to you.
Yeah, our main role is meant to be to influence change, and data is the way that we do that. So you're right, spreadsheets are not going to cut it, and they're an incredibly manual process and prone to error. And digital tools are the way for us to start to maximize the opportunities from using data, especially when you've got really high volumes of it. And so I really do think that being able to move towards something more automated is absolutely key, but also as sustainability practitioners will allow us to start to focus on the things that matter, will allow us to combine the data, the insights with behavioral change, you touched on that, with engagement, and start to apply a lot of the efforts that we want to in the areas that need it. But you need to set that up somehow. You need to, we talked about standardization, we talked about data owners. You need to build the foundations necessary in order to be able to use these sort of digital data platforms to their maximum efforts. But there are certainly different ways that I think that they kind of can deliver benefit. One of that is kind of advanced analytics. So taking data a step forward from compliance, and unfortunately our roles oftentimes start with compliance. It's the way we get our foot in the door. But when we can start to turn around and provide the business case for improving efficiencies, for reducing waste, that's when we start to see some radical changes. And I think internally, for instance, we've started to be able to turn some of the data we started to capture into actions. We've been able to feed that back to senior leadership, and just this year we've been able to turn around and make some really quick decisions that are hopefully going to help us keep on track by the end of this year to our targets, to our carbon emission targets. So we could only really do that by starting to automate processes, getting that data in, and starting to introduce digital platforms and think about how we can tap into that. So I do agree with that.
I'm so glad we only have 4 offices and not 26 business units, because the volume of data and the complexity of that, it's huge. For us, it's having that confidence in the data, the reliability. You've got one system for all social value and sustainability. That single source of truth, it's complete. You're capturing it at the lowest possible level through QR codes on site, and you're not having to, to second guess whether somebody's updated that spreadsheet correctly and whether it's actually the latest version, or whether that's sitting on someone else's laptop. So, it's just that reliability and being able to, validate and sense check that data when it's coming in, that it has scanned all of the elements of that waste ticket, right down to, then using that data in ways that you can identify business process improvements. So, if you're consistently seeing that there's a particular period in a project and across projects that is generating more waste or using more water, then, you can then start to dig down and unpick. And often we find that it's, like pulling that thread, you kind of unpick one piece of data and it leads on to the next and the next. And, before you know it, so it's important to keep it focused on the business objectives and the actual the role. Yeah.
No, absolutely, and it is being able to dig down into the granular and see the trends, normalize it, benchmark, all of that. It's critical, and being able to use that going forward, I think, is essential. Folks, I'm just conscious of the time, and I suppose I just wanted maybe 2 last questions, but I'll definitely try for this one, and it's the supply chain. And I know we've all been very focused on our own businesses because we've had to be to get our own houses in order and all of the rest of it. But, starting to see a lot more kind of engagement with the supply chain, which is good. But any thoughts in terms of how we can get better buy-in, where we can get those guys reporting in, it's as part of the norm? Ashleigh, yep, come to you.
I think for us, we typically subcontract with the people who are actually taking on the work themselves, who don't subcontract. So that's easier when you've got a direct contractual relationship with the supply chain. But I think it's also demystifying and taking the fear out of carbon reporting. At the end of the day, if the subcontractor is using fuel on site, that they know what fuel they've used. They've ordered it and they paid for it. So, we just try and simplify the language around reporting and simplifying how we capture that data so that it doesn't feel like a big task and therefore gets pushed to the back and that sounds too difficult, I'll do it another day. So, I think that's really key for us in the immediate term.
Yes, agreed. And I think establishing very strategic partnerships with different suppliers is absolutely important. Now that we understand what sort of data we want to report on and what feeds into being able to deliver on our sustainability strategy, we've been able to have a lot of conversations with specific suppliers that allows us to leverage those relationships in the interest of driving sustainability. And because we're so large, we really need there to be a one source of truth for everyone and one sort of approach with everyone. And that for us looks like group approved suppliers that for every single region we say, if you're going to have a waste contractor, if you're going to have a fuel supplier or electricity and gas supplier, here are the ones that have gone through sort of rigorous process of assessment with us, and we can work with them. On the background, our team have made sure to work with them to make sure that we can access that data automatically, quarterly or monthly, and it covers the majority of our regions. Similarly, we're starting conversations with the utility management company that's going to be able to go on the ground level and take things like meter readings for us and be able to do that for all regions. But again, we really need to get all of the regions together. So actually our sustainability team plays a really key role in being able to go, we need this from a data perspective, but also here are other ways in which these relationships will improve efficiencies. It will reduce risk. It'll improve financial reporting. It'll have all these other benefits as well. And we've actually been, I think, quite fortunate in seeing a lot of positive responses to our recommendations because we've used data to build that business case and try to look beyond sustainability. So one of the things I'm trying to do increasingly is when I am in a room with a finance person or procurement person is not just talk about sustainability, talk their language, talk about what they're interested in, and that way leverage that relationship internally as well.
The business case and the money side always gets the attention, but it is important and it's part of the business, so it makes total sense. Folks, just again, conscious of the time, I've got one last question I'm just going to throw out to the guys. Look, there's folks in the audience here today. They're maybe just starting out in the journey. They're maybe sitting trying to figure out how do we start this data flow coming from our project teams, from our sites. Any advice, wee nuggets that you could potentially throw out from your own experience that might be a helpful takeaway? Ashleigh, yep.
I think with most things, it's communication. Talking across the different stakeholders involved in an open way. In a kind of culture of sort of no blame, no finger pointing, no making it onerous. It's about trying to make, acknowledging this giant, climate change that's impacting everybody. So I think the will is there, the buy-in is there. It's just how to actually turn that into, real data, real actions on site and throughout the business. So it's just talking, keeping the communication open and be willing to change and learn and adapt, as you try things and it maybe doesn't work.
Yeah, I'd echo the same answer. I think act now, the emergency is there, the crisis is there, we're halfway through the decade, we really have to start acting on what we have at the moment. And if that means in 2-3 years' time being able to look back and understand and account for what that meant, then that's brilliant. But I don't want sustainability teams to be sort of sat there and just looking at spreadsheets, looking at these platforms. That's not our job. Our job is to act. And let that sort of accounting be something that comes is used as a tool. So yeah, act.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to get stuck in the data, stuck in the figures, but actually to understand that impact, communicate that impact, you get the buy-in for sure. Folks, we're just a wee bit over. Is there any questions at all from anyone? No? Okay, brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you to Ashleigh and to Julia for taking part and sharing your experience with us all here today. So thank you both very, very much. Cheers.